Okay, everybody, welcome back from the picture and the restroom break and refresh your drink break. We are ready to get started now with our CEO panel, and this has been a little bit of time in the making. We wanted to make sure we reached out and brought to you another CEO panel, but one from a little bit different perspective, and that's from the male perspective today. So we're excited to see these guys coming together for us, and Ashley has agreed to lead the actual questions and bring to us a little bit of an introduction about our panel. So Ashley has been involved since the get-go. She is one of the individuals that I'll refer to as one of our emerging leaders. She came in, she was pretty timid, a little bit of nervousness, but she said, hey, I want to be on one of your committees. So in doing that, she's really found her voice. She's really come alive. She's really been one of the individuals that we've seen a lot of growth over the years from. And I think she's also grown in her credit union. I think she's moved around in positions, maybe even moved to a different credit union if I'm remembering correctly. So it's just really exciting to see Ashley and where she's come in these last 4 years. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley and let her take over and tell us a little bit about her panel.
Awesome. Oh, actually, I wait. Thank you so much, Amy.
You're welcome.
So we're just going to start the panel today. We want to make this very casual. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to write them down. We're actually going to be taking some questions towards the end. I would love to introduce my panel today. To my immediate left here is my boss, Joe Gamble from City Mark Federal Credit Union. And we also have Bill Lavage from Service First Federal Credit Union. So thank you both so much for being here today. So first question that I actually thought of was, a lot of people when you're, you're a little kid, you'd say, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I don't think anybody's ever really said, well, I want to work in the credit union when I grow up. So I guess my first question, and I'll start with you, Bill, if that's okay. How did you get your start with the credit union movement?
Okay, first I want to tell you I'm very flattered and honored to be asked to be on the panel. So it's interesting to be here to talk about various, whatever you want to talk about, except that the Service First people cannot ask any questions. Joe, you'll get all there. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Okay, so to start, I'm originally from Wilkes-Barre. Hold your applause, but I know there's a lot of people here from Wilkes-Barre. And I started in the credit union movement in, 1979. And tomorrow will be my 38th year with Service First. It's been fun. That reminds me how young I am, but Ashley reminded me more how young I am. She said, do you remember me? I said, I remember your last name because when I coached basketball in Wilkes-Barre when I was a young man in my early 20s, maybe even teens, I said, there was a Matt Choman that played. Are you related? And I expected her to say, that's my brother. It's her dad. So thank you for that. Good wake-up call. So interesting that you said most people don't say I want to go up to be in credit unions. When I was out of college, there was this thing called the civil service test. It may still exist, but it was, you took it to get a government job. My mom prompted me. So after I got done taking it, someone called me from National Credit Union Administration for an interview. So I had to ask my mom what a credit union was. And the first day I was interviewed, my mother gave me the background on credit unions, so I had no idea. Fortunately, she belonged to Wilkes-Barre Federal Employees Federal Credit Union, which I believe is now Cross Valley. Correct, okay. So first I went with NCUA for 3 years. I lived in the Philadelphia area. No offense to anyone who lives in Philadelphia, I was a small town boy, and I wanted to get back more to rural Pennsylvania. So, second Wilkes-Barre story, my cousin Laura called me after I'd been there 3 years, and she said, hey Bill, the Geisinger Employees Federal Credit Union is in trouble and they're looking for a manager. Okay, that's an hour from Danville. So, to carry that story a little bit further for now, so 30-some years later, Laura, same person, calls me and says, we need a new CEO. Would you help us interview? And we hired Joe. So Laura's been a pain in both our sides. Is she your chairman, Joe?
Vice Chair.
Vice chairman, okay. No, Laura's a very good credit union person, been on supervisory committee board, and is still very active with CityMark on the board. So that's how I got started, and I went to Geisinger Employees Federal Credit Union, soon to become Service First when we expanded beyond just Geisinger as an SEG. Went from 2 million in assets to now we're over 400 million. Half a branch, because like most of you, our first office was a third, if that, size of this room, and it was a pretty old beat up shack. When I was interviewed, I didn't ask to see the office, and they interviewed me in Geisinger, which is pretty upscale. And as I walked to the job on my first day and saw it, I thought, this can't be right. But it was, and that's the history behind all that. So that's my story.
My turn? Can you guys, does it work? Can you hear me? Okay. So my very first credit union I was hired at was Chris Woods' credit union. So she's here today. She was my very first boss, and she beat the crap out of me. In a good way. In a good way, she really taught me what credit unions were, what they stood for, and helped instill in me a passion for credit unions. So then when she left, I went with her to a different credit union. So I worked with Chris for a long time and I learned a lot from her. And then moved on to be a VP at a smaller credit union. When I got there, it was about 23 million assets. When I left, around 50. And then 5 years later, which will be my 5-year anniversary this Friday, I'll be at CityMark for 5 years. And it's really funny because when I was little, when I started working for Chris, I was like, you know what, I'm going to be VP when I'm 20 and CEO when I'm 30. I was very close. I was a VP when I was 25, CEO when I was like 30 and a half. So technically, yes, I fulfilled my what I wrote down in my dream, but I'm super happy. I have great employees and I love what I do.
So having to climb the corporate ladder, what do you think the biggest challenge to getting you where you are today? So, Joe, do you want to start with that one?
The biggest thing for me is my age. I think people would look at me and they're like, who's this kid? They couldn't realize, and they didn't even think if I was over 21 to be able to work at a credit union. But that is what I always got, was my age, and a lot of people would just automatically assume I didn't know what I was doing because I was younger. So I've had to fight that stigma and that stereotype for a very long time. It still happens today. If I'm in a room with a lot of seasoned executives, they look at me a little bit differently until they start to talk to me, until then they realize that I do know what I'm doing. But that seems to be the biggest thing for me was my age.
That's valid, because if you could picture it, I was 27 when I started. I don't know how young you were, Joe.
12.
But our board of directors were much older, and I don't think they took me serious for a while, and probably for good reason. But the youth is part of it. The biggest challenge I've had to overcome is I don't really like to hurt people's feelings. So in my past, long past, when there was a decision to be made, there's people who have another decision in mind, and there's people who support you. And I was always bothered by the people I was going to say, I'm not going with your decision. But I'm glad I learned to overcome that, because when you try to please everybody, you really please no one. And that's one of the biggest challenges I overcame.
So sometimes for people, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are in the credit union movement. Sometimes you need somebody to look up to. Did you ever find a personal mentor to help advance your career? And what tips would you give to someone who's actually looking for a mentor? So somebody that's trying to actually find one.
So my very first mentor is sitting right in front of me, is Chris. Again, she taught me a lot about what credit unions were. Like when I started there, I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about credit unions. So she really helped me develop myself at a very young age when I started working for her. Then, this is going to be a shocking one for most people, but the next person that I looked up to and I really mentored with was my mother-in-law. And not many people have good relationships with their mother-in-law, but my mother-in-law was outstanding. She was a natural-born leader. She's one of those kind of women that she might not necessarily have your friendship, but she had your respect and your attention, and she commanded it. She didn't ask for it, she commanded your attention when she spoke or when she entered a room. So over the years, I've being around her and learning from her, a lot of leadership and management qualities that I have come from her. She is one of the biggest mentors I've had in the last 10 years. So if I ever had a problem, I would call her, and she would tell me exactly, even if I didn't want to hear it, she would tell me the truth. And that's what you really need, not someone to just be your friend and say, oh, it's probably not your fault. You need someone that's going to tell you you did something wrong and you need to fix it. So when you're looking for a mentor, you really need to find someone that's going to tell you the real truth and not the fake truth that you want to hear to make yourself feel better. Because honestly, usually it is our fault and we just don't want to hear it. So when you're looking for someone, find someone that is really going to help you get where you want to go, not just make you feel better about what you're doing.
I didn't have a mentor per se, although my first job with NCUA, my supervisor's name was Frank Gifford, not the football player, for those of you that are a little older. But what Frank did was, when you first start a job, you make a ton of mistakes, and that's okay, because you learn from that. He never got angry, never got upset, would just say, let me show you something. Here's what you should have did, here's what you did, what are you going to do next time? And for 3 years, he was very good, set me in the right direction. The two other types of people I'll call mentors is, I watch positive people and how they treat people, and I've learned from them over my life. I've also watched the negative people who, abuse isn't the right word, but maybe verbally abuse people, treat them unkindly, and said, I never want to be like that, and I won't be. Advice for if you're looking for a mentor, find someone that you could trust, that has your best interest in mind, and that also has the, what would you say, thought process or candidness of a 4 or 5-year-old. Because if I go to a 4-year-old and say, am I ugly? They're going to tell you the truth. And if they say you're ugly, you're probably ugly. You're right, you don't want to hear, oh, no, you take it easy. But you're right, you want to hear from someone that's very much going to tell you that, yep, it's your fault, or no, you're on the right track, go for it.
Well, since this is mostly women in the room right now, what do you think is the most significant barrier for female leadership?
I think it's just the stigma of being a woman, to be honest, because a lot of old school boys club men look at women that they're not on the same level as them. And I think that's the biggest stigma that you're fighting, is that old mentality is that she's a woman, she obviously can't do as good a job as a man can, which is just completely false. When I look to hire people in my staff, I don't care if you're a man or a woman. All I care is that you can do the job they need you to do and do it the way that you're supposed to do it. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't forward thinking, and especially it all depends on what part of the state you're in too, and the country. And it depends on what kind of people you're dealing with as to what kind of extra then stereotypes that you might be fighting as well. But I think it's just the idea that you're a woman. That is really what a lot of you that are facing. And I think at our credit union, we understand that, so we go extra to make sure that everyone feels equal all the time, that no one's better than anybody else, and that everyone is rewarded for doing their job correctly and doing it the right way, regardless if you're a man or a woman. So, but I will say at my credit union, when I first started, it was all women. So when a member would call, they would say, I talked to that guy, and I was like, oh my God, it's me. Somebody else I could blame. I gotta get at least one other guy in here because I need someone else to blame. So I brought in Nick, and I'm like, oh, thank God it's him. But now I think we still have more women than we do men. And it wasn't intentionally like that, it's just those are the best people to fill the positions that we had, and they're the ones that perform. So we really didn't look at it like man or woman, we just looked at it as who's the best, and that's the person we want to get. somebody to my right I had to coerce into coming to work for me. I almost had to go to her house and make her come work for me. But when you see goodness in whoever man or woman, you really try extra hard to get them on your team. And Ashley has been a very, very big positive change to our team. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Joe.
Brownie points.
Joe's correct. There are a lot of people that still have stereotypical thought mindsets. I think that's diminishing, and I'll plug service first. We hire the best person for the job, regardless of what the diversity issue, gender issue is. If you could do the job, you'll get the job. And we have, 8 people here today? And they're all fantastic. They do a tremendous job. If I'm looking at it from the outside, sometimes what I see is when a female applies for a job, they need to be more confident and say, I could do this, and I'm going to prove to wherever you're applying that I could do this regardless. And then perseverance. If at first you don't get the job, don't give up. Just keep trying, and eventually they'll see that you're good, you could do the job, and you'll succeed.
Thank you. So me personally, I'm a part of the Global Women's Leadership Network, but I'm also a member of the Young Professionals Network here. Has there been any branches or networking groups that you've been a part of over the years that you really think have helped to advance your career?
Whoever thinks of it first.
I'm all right. The annual convention bar.
Enough said. There's a little bit to be said about that. There's another relationship. Chris Wood and I have known each other probably since before Joe was born. Sorry, Chris.
That's true.
However, the networking we've maintained over whatever number of years is phenomenal. So when you're out at a conference, mix it up. Go out, talk to people. You'll make friends for life. And then when you're thinking of a new idea for your credit union, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can pick up the phone. Joe, what did you do when you implemented this? So it's a good point. As far as what organizations I belonged to, most of them were civic organizations, communities, so the youth involvement wasn't around when I was younger, but the networking is key.
We have in Pennsylvania, we have the YPN, which is a very good network to join. I would suggest getting involved in that one. There's also your chapter meetings. If you're looking to meet executives, they're typically at chapter meetings that you can go to. Then if you're looking on like the national level, there's all kinds of councils you can join through CUNA. CUNA has so many conferences you can go to. Do we always get to go? No, they're super expensive to send everyone to, but they have councils that you can join and communities that you can go on and you can talk in, ask questions. I ask a lot of questions on the compliance blog, and Joanne always answers me. She's like, why don't you just ask me? But and Bill's right, you make that connection and you can ask them for things for the rest of your career, because no one's sitting there rewriting a policy. We're just changing our name and somebody else's. Let's be honest, we're not going to sit there and do that. But then you have those connections that you can reach out to and get that policy from, or to get someone's outside perspective on things. So as many things that you can go to, I would say you absolutely should.
Awesome. So obviously, everybody in this room has a very busy life. How do you balance your work and personal life?
I don't like people working after closing time, except for me. I do all the time. But I'm different. But I don't like when my employees go on vacation, they go on vacation, I don't bother them. They need that time to be with their family and their friends and not be at work. And I think a lot of credit unions don't take that into consideration, that people actually have lives outside of the credit union and they have families. And I think it's a much needed thing that a lot of credit unions need to work on, the fact that they need to separate those times. Like, we're not just there to live, breathe, and eat our credit unions. Like, that is not, we go to work, but that's it. Like, there's got to be that cutoff that says, I am now with family and friends time because we need it, because otherwise we'll go crazy at work. So what I do, I tell them, I'm like, you're not allowed to email me, you're not allowed to call me when you go on vacation. You know, unless something very important comes up that I need, then I bother them. So, but we do is we make sure that that's a well-known thing, that you do need to have a work-life balance, because you'll go crazy and you're gonna end up hating your job, because all you do is your job. So, you know, that might be a conversation to have with a manager or whoever you report to say, you know, like, I can't work 80 hours a week. That's kind of impossible, and then be on call for you at any other given time. It's a hard conversation to have, but it's a necessary conversation to have, because then you'll end up just hating your job and wanting to go work somewhere else. Whereas if maybe you had that conversation, you might be able to get that work-life balance. But it's vital. It's absolutely vital, because you'll go nuts.
A lot of people struggle with work-life balance. I know when we ask our crew, what would you like to hear about? What would you like to learn about? That's one of the #1 topics, is how to balance home and work life. My thought is, when you're successful, as all of you are or will be, you throw yourself into everything 100%. So you have your job and you're 100% committed. You're going to set the world on fire and work 20 hours a day. And then you have your family that you're committed to, that you're going to see how many hours a day if you work 20. So we all know, and my personal feeling is, your family comes first. And you work basically to support your family and do things that are fun and interesting. Doesn't mean you're at work because you don't want to be. You're driven to be successful there too. So it's a mindset. If your work dictates that you need to be there, then I think personally you need to make a change. If you're working too much and you should be at home and you could make that change, then tell yourself, I'm going to be home more frequently and the work will be as it is.
Thank you. What you just said there, family comes first, actually, that's kind of resonated with me. So according to Pay Scale Incorporated, the gender pay gap is shrinking, but a significant disparity in how men and women are paid remains. Women are still making only 79 cents for every dollar that men make in 2019. What are you doing in your credit union to ensure that there's parity in your compensation programs?
Again, what I said is, when we don't look at man or woman, it's what kind of job is it, and that's the kind of pay it is. And it doesn't matter who's filling that position, it's going to be the same pay. Or we'll set up a range to say it could be from A to B, and depending on experience, that's how you're going to get paid. But we have, in our credit union, so let's say we have 4 executives, 2 of them are women, and 2 of them are men. So we pay very, very equally to what men and women make. So I personally don't see why women don't get paid as much as men, because they do just the same exact job as their male counterpart would do. But then you have that mentality of, well, yeah, she's doing it, but not as well as a man could do it, so we're not going to pay her as much as that. Which, like Bill said, I think that's diminishing. It's kind of going away, but it still exists. It's still around, it still exists. So that's the point where I think some women need to stand up and be like, well, I'm not going to work for those pennies anymore. You're going to have to pay me what I am worth. And maybe show them some data to say, you know, my male counterpart at the same exact credit union is making this, why am I not, when I am performing the way I am performing? And a lot of times I think is if you stand up to someone, regardless, man or woman, it's a bullying thing. It's what they can hold over your head. You bring them the facts and you stand up to them, and then they'll probably back down a little bit and maybe meet you halfway, and then you're on the way to getting what you actually wanted. So, but again, in my credit union, I don't care, man or woman. Everybody gets paid for what the job they're doing and the job and how they're doing it. So to me, it doesn't really matter.
I think a big part of it is to have an objective compensation system. So at Service First, we use an external group, and we've used them for years to keep it consistent. Let's see if I get it right, though. Human Resource Performance Solutions, Missy, is that right? You get a gold star. And what they do is they give us ranges for every job we have, and even jobs we're thinking of hiring. So when that's set, we post it, and when people apply, again, it doesn't matter, male or female, that's the job range. Experience does come into play within that range, because if you've worked somewhere in the same job for 10 years compared to someone who's 1 year, there may be a discrepancy. But again, it wouldn't matter whether you're male or female. Here's the job range, and here's what we're going to pay you.
Bill, we'll start with you on this one. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Well, the first thing I would say to myself, I always look at mistakes I've made and say, well, I was stupid, I shouldn't have did this, I should have done that. But as I already mentioned, if I didn't make those mistakes, I probably wouldn't be where I am. Advice I would give myself is to take better care of myself health-wise, and I'm healthy, I'm not sick. It's just, when you look back, almost like the personal life-work balance. Yeah, I could go to the gym, or I could stay at work another hour. Or I could go to the gym, or I could have a pizza and a beer. And in my case, the pizza and the beer usually took over the gym. So that's the advice I'd give myself.
I think what I would have told my younger self, which is only like, I'm only 25, so when I was an adolescent, it was maybe to maybe slow down a little bit. Because I think when I was younger, I was like, go, 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 but I also wanted to make a name for myself, and I wanted to succeed. But sometimes I would go too quickly, and then you make mistakes along the way. Again, like Bill said, if you make a mistake, you learn from it. But I think a lot of importance is in the small details, and a lot of times I've overlooked the small details, and Chris is laughing because she say that to me all the time. So that's really what I would tell myself, is to really slow down just a little bit and really grasp the entire situation before making an emotional decision. Because I think as human beings, we emotionally react, and sometimes it's not the best thing to do to emotionally react, and really consider the whole situation, all the facts, before jumping in with 2 feet.
So a lot of times, a lot of people talk about different books and TED Talks. I always say that I'm going to read more. Actually, I was talking to Chris about this earlier today. And a lot of people are more into reading, listening to audiobooks. Now they're more readily available. TED Talks are a big thing. Is there any TED Talks or books that you would recommend that you actually have enjoyed over the years?
There's 2. One's called Unleash Your Greatness, and it's not a very big book, so you can read it in like an hour or 2. It has it gets right to the point. There's not a whole lot of extra clout that's in there. It gets right to the details. So Unleash Your Greatness, and another one is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. There's a couple in that series. It's just a really bright book, and then I saw that on. I was like, I'm gonna read this. That was a very good book too, and there's I think a couple in that series as well. I don't like, to be honest, I like to sit down and read a 500-page book. I just don't have time. And so I like something that's short, gets to the point, maybe has larger print, so there's less pages, so I can get through it quickly. So those are 2 of the Unleash Your Greatness is a very, very good book, and it's small. It's only like 120 pages. I read it in probably like 3 or 4 hours, and it's only written on like half the page, so you get through them really quick. You feel super cool when you read the whole book in a day. So that one's a very good book. I do enjoy that a lot.
My staff knows I'm not a reader, so Joe, even a 60-page book takes me a year. But 2 books that I do remember that resonated with me is, one is called Leaders Eat Last, and basically it's telling you how to lead and have your employees see that you've got their back. The second one, which took a long time to read because it's very small print, very long, is fairly old, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I've actually read that a couple times because it does point out some things that you're doing that maybe you should continue doing, and some things that you should stop doing.
So since I started a City Mark Credit Union, my self-confidence has actually been built up a little bit. I don't think about 2 years ago I would have actually been on the stage doing this, because I would have been too nervous too. So I'm very interested to hear Joe's response to this. What have you done to build your own self-confidence over the years?
Well, if you ask my mother, nothing. Because she says I came out like this. So she's like, you never really cared what anybody else thought, and I don't. So I just asked the other day, and she's like, you've been doing that since you were like 2. I was like, oh, okay, that's where I get it. But things I've done to build my confidence is sometimes when I'm in a room with like really seasoned executives, I can almost feel a little bit dumber than they are. And I shouldn't, because I know what I'm doing, but it's just like, it's an overwhelming feeling that you get to say this person's been, you know, all these people have been CEOs for 30 and 40 years. They're looking at me like I should know exactly what they know. So I do sometimes get that, I do. So what I've done is, you know, just read up and make sure that I'm up to date on everything that I need to know, because knowledge is power. So if you know what you're talking about, no one's going to be able to look at you in any way other than they know what they're talking about. And I think knowledge is something we kind of forget. We just want to start arguing, but you can't argue with facts, and you cannot argue with education and knowledge. So I would say, you know, really is knowledge, and that arms you with a lot of confidence that you know what you're talking about when you go to talk to somebody like that.
2 items. I've learned to set personal and professional goals that are achievable, and then maybe some stretch goals. Because once you start achieving goals, it does build internal confidence that, hey, I could do this. And now I'm going to set another goal that's going to be a little bit bigger and better. And I alluded to this before, hang around with positive people, because you'll feed off their positive fire. And they give you a little bit of confidence. Not that they're not being honest with you, but if you know some positive people that you hang around with, you know what I mean. It does build your confidence and makes you want to push yourself even harder.
Phil, we'll start with you on this one. What was the best leadership advice you were ever given during your career?
Okay, let me think about that one. Well, I could tell you one that is not meant to be derogatory to anyone, but when I first started at Geisinger Employees Federal Credit Union, our board, which is almost completely changed, was a mess. They would argue with themselves at meetings, and here I am 27 trying to tell them we should do this, and who are you? You've been here a month, what are you trying to do? And NCUA was ready to close the place. And it was going nowhere quick. The then CEO at Geisinger pulled me aside. He wasn't on the board, but he saw the turmoil. And he said, hey, I'll give you a bit of advice. This is all on you. An effective CEO can overcome an ineffective board, but an effective board can never overcome an ineffective CEO. So I thought about that for a little bit and realized that if I don't change the organization and take control of this, an ineffective board is not. So yes, I risked getting fired, et cetera, but that was one bit of advice. The other good leadership one is just have confidence and be proud of what you've done, have the confidence that you should and could succeed, and most likely you will.
Me? This came from my mother-in-law, who is a diva. She always would tell me, she goes, dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have, which can translate into not only your appearance, but in the way that you work. You really are, don't just do what you're supposed to do on a daily basis, take some initiative and maybe show your superiors that you can do something on another level. So that's how I always translated that. Plus always look nice. That was always another one. She always wanted to make sure you look nice too, because you're always dressing the part and you feel more confident, you feel like you can do things better if you feel confident on the inside. So I think it goes both ways.
So in the past years, women seem to be gaining a stronger voice. The Me Too movement has brought light issues across the nation, especially in Hollywood and with the USA Olympics gymnastics. How has this impacted your organization and or the overall work, your overall workplace?
I don't think it's really impacted our workplace. There's only 10 of us. So we've always done everything the same way, the way we treat our employees. So yeah, we really haven't changed anything because we weren't really not doing anything to begin with. I think we go above and beyond to make sure everyone feels appreciated, equal, and we don't stand for any kind of negativity from anybody. I don't care who it's coming from. You know, we really stop that right away because no one should have to work in an environment that they don't feel comfortable in. So we're on top of that. Even if somebody, looks at someone the wrong way, we're on top of it. But I don't think we don't have that. We get along. Like I said, I cherry picked my team, so I stole from other credit unions, so I kind of knew how they already worked. So that's why I don't have that. But even if there was, we would combat that right away because at our credit union, we don't stand for any kind of mistreatment of anybody for any reason. Doesn't matter, man or woman. We do not stand. Even if somebody talks down to you, we do not stand for that. Absolutely not at all. So we would take care of it. We would. This is an example. We have an employee that I had to let go because I didn't like the way she treated her fellow coworker. It was 2 women. So right away, it was gone. It wasn't even a question because no one should have to stand to be treated or talked to like that.
We're pretty much the same as we were. We have policies and processes in place. You could call them whistleblower policies, but if someone is being bullied, harassed, whatever, you know the avenues you could follow to report that. And I could tell you it works because I like to say we have a perfect work environment. But in the past, there's been some serious issues that have come to our attention, and fortunately we've dealt with them quickly and in the right manner and stopped whatever bad behavior was going on.
What do you think has been your greatest personal asset that has helped you to get to your position today?
I would say my confidence and my personality. So I think that's really helped to really push through those stigmas of age. Because like I said, I get that all the time. They look at me like, what's this kid doing here? So I think I wouldn't take no for an answer either. If someone's like, oh, you can't do that, like, watch me do it, and watch me do it number one. So I think that's one of the biggest ones is I refuse to fail. I mean, sometimes I make mistakes and sometimes that I get setbacks, but the bigger picture, in my mind, I refuse to fail at anything that I do. So I think that's one of the biggest things that's helped me push through is both that award-winning personality and the fact that I just won't take no for an answer. I will constantly keep doing it until I do it, until I get what I want.
I like people in general. I do whatever walk of life it is. I try to communicate with people, and I think it's been successful because whoever you are, I could talk to you, I listen to you. Do we always agree? Maybe not. But I think when you consistently communicate with your coworkers, your family, you learn a lot more than sitting in your office and making conclusions about people just by the way they look or talk. So another bit of advice is always talk to your team. Listen to them, make it fun, and it's a good thing.
If I can piggyback on that. One of the biggest things that I can remember from when I first started was I had this one supervisor that would walk by my office and not even say good morning, which I thought was the rudest thing that I've ever encountered. So I make it a priority to say good morning to everybody and say how they're doing and be involved in both their work, and as much personal life as they wish to share. And thank you. A lot of people forget that the word thank you, one, is free, and two, it's very easy to do. I think a lot of supervisors, managers, CEOs forget that they forget to just thank people for doing their job. They feel, oh, well, that's their job, they should do it. Yeah, but a thank you, a little handwritten card, a thank you, a gift card goes such a long way that will also make you, I think, stand out a little bit too, is, to really put the extra effort into it. If you're gonna be there, be there. If you're not, then just go home.
And that's one thing I could say is Joe exemplifies appreciation like nobody else. So that's one thing, like I said, that's worked in our organization. One of my last questions for you. What advice would you give to an individual that's just starting at the credit union movement? Somebody that's coming in from the ground up, what advice would you give to them?
Learn as much as you can. And like I said, arm yourself with knowledge. Because we all started on the teller line, I think I did. We all started from just entry level and then work our way up. But you don't work your way up if you don't know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to get anywhere. So knowledge is power. You need to learn as much as you can from as many people as you can. Learn how the whole thing works together. Because if you're just going to do marketing, or if you're only going to process ACH, you have no idea how all the pieces fit together, and therefore you can't. Sometimes it's harder for you to understand how the whole thing works. So, challenge a coworker, ask them, well, why do we do it that way? How can I learn how to do that, and really learn how to do everything. At our very first credit union, we only had one internet line, so we had to run in the back, pull the cord out to pull a credit report. I could have hid, and that green bar printer was so big, I think I could have physically gotten there. So, I learned how to do a lot from a very small credit union. It's really helped develop me as I get older. So I'd really say learn as much as you possibly can, and don't be afraid to step outside the box, because the credit union movement is changing. We're no longer just one thing. There's so many different things that are happening, and creativity and new things are happening. So I would say step outside your comfort zone. You'll be surprised what you'll find and what you're capable of if you step outside of your own little box and your own little world.
My advice would be to be kind and open and friendly with all your coworkers, your members, your board of directors, your supervisor, because it'll help you along the way. 2, ask questions. And if you get the answer, well, that's the way we've always done it, go to someone else, but also tell them that you got the answer, that's the way we've always done it. Be confident, and always think about moving up to the next position, whether it's next year, 3 years, 5 years from now. As you're doing that, you'll start to learn more and ask yourself questions. And again, if your mind is set and you do a good job where you are, there's no reason you can't get that next position.
Awesome, thank you, Phil. Especially when you said ask questions. I remember when I started as a credit union movement, that was one of my, I was always afraid to ask questions. So I'm glad you said that, because like I said, that kind of resonates with my beginnings of the credit union movement. So we are going to open it up for questions. I did actually, my nerves at the beginning, I forgot to mention, to thank Ron as well. He's out the west side of the state. And also Clarence was actually going to be here, but was not able to attend today. So he's from that Federal Credit Union. So he was also supposed to be here. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to start out with? Yes.
I had heard a statistic. It was from a woman CEO, and she was helping to hire for other CEOs. And she found that 90% of the applications that came in for the CEO position were for men. And after exploring that, what they discovered was that women will look at a job application, and if they don't qualify for 90% of the criteria, they won't apply. Whereas men, if they qualify for 60%, they're in. So I'm curious if you have seen that play out. I know, Bill, you've mentioned confidence. Have you seen that play out, especially with negotiating salary? I wonder if that plays any part in men making more than women. Are they negotiating better?
We don't negotiate salary. I mean, if you're coming into the organization and we offer you this, and you say, I want this much more, it's probably not going to be a good fit. We have negotiated. I can't speak to negotiating at the people I hire at my level with, whether it's male or female. But that's the confidence thing I was mentioning before. And you're correct, because someone on the Service First team mentioned this to me, that a male generally will apply for the job, even if he has 10% of the experience. Whereas a female generally will say, I don't know if I qualify. So they won't even apply. And that could be part of the issue. So the bottom line is go for it.
I agree. I think that's very true. I think negotiating probably, yes, that's probably a big part of it, that they don't have the confidence that they know how to do the entire job. When I first started, our credit union was like, bad. And they didn't know me, I didn't know them, they didn't know what I could do. So when we came into a salary, it was a little bit lower than I wanted to, but I accepted that. And then once I showed them what I can do and I was more confident, then we had that renegotiation. So maybe it's just getting your foot in the door, showing them what you can do, and then you have more power behind you to say, I think I'm worth a little bit more than what you're throwing at me, as compared to my my male counterpart. So maybe it is. I think you're 100% right. Men apply for. If you ever listed a job on Indeed, everyone applies for it. Doesn't matter who they are, even if they have 0% of the skills. So I think that's very true. That's very true. I think that a lot of the women that work for me would probably feel the same way, that they don't think they can do it, but they can. So I think it's part of as leaders for us to show them that they can do it and to boost their confidence, showing them they can do what they really need to.
Bill, I'm going to direct this question to you. One of the things that's prevalent in your leadership style is fun. And that's something you haven't talked about, and it's really prevalent throughout the whole credit union. You may want to talk about that a little bit.
Thanks, Karen. We have a list of core values in our that Service First that dictates our culture, and they're not just, okay, we put 7 down so we have a culture, but the one predominant thing is fun, and we create a fun environment, and it helps with everything we do. We even have a group called the Dysfunctional Committee, which I think was last week, baked fortune cookies, which had made up fortunes, which I was a part of. They were HR friendly. The cookies didn't turn out, so we ended up going to Weiss Markets and buying. By the way, the fortunes weren't as good, but that's just part of some of the things we do. And you're right, Karen, we do, everyone, we tell them, make it your job to create a fun environment. And thanks for the question.
So you both talked a little bit about what you would do as a younger person to grow in your role. As senior leadership, what kind of advice can you give those in the room who might be able to help their team members grow?
We could say do it. I would say yes. As much information that can be shared, the better. Because I think a lot of senior people maybe don't want to share that knowledge, or maybe they're just not asked the right way to share that knowledge. So maybe it's finding someone that they can share it with in the organization, or creating a committee, a team that can actually share that information. Because I think that does happen when they get set in their ways. And just from the experience of the other people I've worked with, they get set in their ways and they don't really want to do anything extra. And that's not everybody, but just from my experience, I think that does happen. That's where we've always done it like that button comes from. So maybe it is sharing, it's really sharing that information. Say, hey, I have 40 years of knowledge here. You can benefit from a lot of it. And I think that's what Chris did with me. She's like, this kid is awesome. So she did say that when she made me give my youth ambassador speech 4 million times. But exactly. But it's finding that individual that probably stands out to say, this person has a bright future. I am going to do what I can to help push them to have a brighter future.
If you have a wealth of knowledge and you're successful, you should pick someone on your team and mentor them, not only about work, but just life experiences. If you see they're doing things right, back that up, positive reinforcement. If there's some things that you think they could do better, share it with them. And over time, you'll become that person that they trust to tell you, here's what you need to do to succeed. So yeah, go for it.
I feel kind of like Karen, we're feeding Bill some questions, but I think one of the things that is, we're seeing positive things happening at Service First are about some of the things we're doing with our own Young Professionals Network, as well as our own management trainee program, kind of building that next layer. Would you like to talk a little bit about that and how that's impacting the organization?
Sure. There's a bunch of the Young Professionals group here Rachel is chair, lead, whatever, and co-chair is Devin?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Both previous youth ambassador contestants, so good job. And they're involved with building talent to continue young talent. And they also do some fun things. They held a meeting which was pretty well attended, the Service First Young Professionals. And the thought, and I still thank Rachel for this, is Bill Lavage tribute. And it was interesting. I won't repeat some of the trivia things, but it was nice and lighthearted. And Rachel's thought was, it will get these people to see that you're human and that you're fun to be around, because with 12 branches, it does get tough to make it around to everyone. So we also have a group called I2I, Innovation to Idea, Innovation to Ideas. Okay, I had it right. That's more of a management group, but they tackle a lot of problems and challenges or new services, and they bat it around and then present it to our leadership team for final decision. And that group of people, there's a lot of talent there, and most of them are much younger than me. So it's good to know that there is various layers of talent at Service First. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So Joe, you were talking about, you're creating how you leader that people need regardless of, and you don't tolerate. How do you handle that from the membership side? So I've experienced it myself where I can say whatever I'm saying to Joe Schmo on the phone, and I'm accurate, but I'm not valid, and I hand it off to someone else who's regurgitating everything. But I just said, and because he's a male, it's okay. How do you combat that?
I think that happens a lot. You literally tell them the same exact thing. They're like, oh yeah, it's perfect. And you literally just repeat it with the same person sitting right before you. 100%. If somebody asks me to pick up the phone, I will kindly say to the member as nicely as possible, she just told you the same exact thing. I can't always be here to answer a question. You really have to believe in what she just said is correct. And I think they do that a lot with younger people. I don't know if it necessarily, in my experience, has been a man or woman thing. I think it's because you're young and they're like, oh, they just don't know what they're talking about. I need to talk to someone who's a little bit older, who's been here for a while, and they tell you the same exact thing, and they're like, okay. So I will do that, and I think some of my staff will do that too. Well, you can always ask that person. They have the answer for you. We train everybody equally. They know the same thing. And I think it slowly has stopped that. Like, I don't get savings account questions anymore, thank gosh. But I think it still happens no matter what. I don't think you're ever going to combat it, because I think those come from a lot of our older members too, that maybe they've dealt with that same person forever, or they just want to talk to someone who is, in their eyes, on the same level as them. And some of those things you're just never going to be able to change, but that's what we do. We just try and tell them, that person could have helped you if they told you the same exact thing that I just told you, so next time you can just ask them in a very, very nice way.
Just to piggyback on what Joe said, just from our organization, sometimes just trying to make that connection with them. I found, some people are like, well, I want to speak to Joe right now. Some people are like, oh, I want to speak to Joe right now. And, Joe's not always readily available, but sometimes, just trying to tell them your name, say, hey, we have a problem, why don't you reach out to me, and trying to make that personal connection with them has helped. I mean, we're a small organization, so it's a lot easier, I guess, in our organization there's only 10 of us, so, it's a lot easier to get hold of somebody, but just, like I said, making that personal connection, that really helped our organization.
And I think too, the other thing is to go with the questions I was asking is sometimes not always male or female, sometimes it's that title. You have that C-suite title.
Yeah.
What you say is God. Versus someone who may be more operationally knowledgeable. Not to, but they know that every day they're experiencing it.
I have that a lot too. People would just only ask me questions. Well, I need to ask him, and it's what I've told them is I'm going to give you to this person to talk to because I just can't right now. I just don't have the time to answer a lone question. So after repeatedly doing that, then they just kind of slowly stop, and then they start asking that person, and then they find out, oh, I get good answers from this person too. Like, shocker. We employ people that know what they're doing. So they slow. It's not an overnight thing. It's not like you're gonna flip a switch and they're gonna do it. It's one of those, like Ashley said, building that relationship with them, but then also pointing them in that direction. So, and then I might follow up and be like, hey, how did they treat you? And they're like, oh, very well. I'm like, good. See, now you can ask her instead of having you come and ask me. And it works.
Well, I think it's important too on the flip side of that to train your staff to be problem solvers and help them independent so that when you're not willing and when you're not able to, them another company that they're able to work with those things as well, or find the resources to do so.
Absolutely. Cross-training, we do that a lot. We're smaller, so everybody knows, everybody really has to know how to do everything. So a lot of organizations don't do that. Like there's 17,000 different departments and they get transferred 4 times and they get hung up on and they get really angry. Whereas if we cross-trained a lot better, that the person who answers the phone can help them right away. And that'll also build that confidence too. Hey, I got someone who knows what they're doing when I hit 0. So that probably helps as well. Not to say that in big organizations, all the different departments they have don't work, but it's just different. And I think when members are members of big organizations, small organizations, they know what they're kind of getting into when they join those different kind of organizations. So they have different expectations, I guess.
Any questions? Yes.
One of the things I think that's unique to women is our careers are a little bit more roller coaster than men's, where I know for me personally, in my 20s, I was gung-ho and moving up very quickly. And then I had 3 children, and I'm like, whoa, I don't want to do that. And really slow down. And then it's difficult to then know that you have that work-life balance to move back up. I think Service First does a great job at supporting that, but what kinds of things do you see that can help support that for women that aren't necessarily the young professionals? I think we do a ton with young professionals, but that 30, 40 something that has kids and is afraid to take those steps.
Like I said, when we advertise for anything, we're not really specifically looking for any type of any person. So we encourage everyone to apply. And if we do have like a stay-at-home mom who now wants to come back in the workforce, we make them feel as equal as they possibly can be with everybody else. Train them the right way and give them the knowledge that they need to be able to be up to par with someone who's worked for the last 20 years, let's say. So I think it's just easier at our organization because there's not many people, and Bill said that his first office can fit in here, a third of it. My office right now can fit in here just from that column over, both of them. So we are on top of each other. So we constantly encourage one another and constantly help one another. It's a very team atmosphere. And I would think that most credit unions are like that. Even if they're bigger, they're more spread out, they still have that culture, because that's who we are, is a team environment. But I think you're still, when you're coming back into it, you're always going to feel totally different until you get back into it. I don't think there's anything that we can do on our side to tell you, hey, you're going to be perfect, when it's really, I think, maybe an inner thing, because you haven't worked in the last couple of years to get back into working. I mean, same thing happened to my mom, and it was hard to get back into working again, but she just kind of had to do it because she had to pay for kids.
Along those same lines of maybe women re-entering the workforce, from a hiring perspective, what can you say to those that might be coming back out to work who don't have a college education and they're applying for the same job from someone who may be a few years out of college, they've got the degree. It seems like there are more people in the workforce now that have college degrees than when I first entered the workforce, and probably not you, Joe, but maybe you, Bill, I think. But how can you help those that may be re-entering that don't have the college education to have that confidence to go ahead and apply, even though they know they're applying against, folks with degrees?
I'm speaking again from Service First perspective, but there's something to be said for what would you call it, school smart, and then something to be said for street smart. So we'll take the person that we think is going to be the maturest person and one that will do the job. Now, are there groups out there that say, well, if you don't have an MBA, don't even apply? Sure. But it is tough getting back into the workforce, and I'm hopeful that most employers take that to heart and say, hey, if your kid has a Little League game tonight, get out of here. That's more important. Just go tend to it. I know that doesn't address getting back into the workforce, but I hope I answered your question a little bit.
When I do when I post for a job, I don't ever put in there that you have to have a degree. I kind of even just skip over that, because a lot of times you can interview with someone with a degree and someone who has experience knows what they're doing and they're the better person for the job. So when I put in our job descriptions that we're just looking for someone who is a nice person. I don't care if you don't know how to wait on someone or run a teller drawer, because we can teach you how to do a lot of those things. But you cannot teach someone to be a nice person. So a lot of times on our job listings, we put no college necessary, unless it's maybe like the CFO position where you probably should have a degree. But again, in that same instance, experience and a degree are, in my book, are the same exact thing. So, because I have young nephews and they have degrees, and I would never hire them to do anything. I can't even get them to cut grass, let alone have a job for 40 hours. So we put, I really put that, I stress that we're really looking for a member-focused, friendly, outgoing person who, that to me means more than you have 6 degrees that you probably are not going to use in this position anyway. So we always put that in our job description so that everyone will apply.
You touched on the fact that you're kind of cherry pickers. So I have a couple of things to read on. First, a Harvard development. What kind of strategies that you use within your search?
For part-time? A lot of time for part-time, to be honest with you, I look for stay-at-home moms who just want to work maybe during the day when the kids are at school, or can fill in. If I'm looking, it depends on what kind of part-time too. If I'm looking for like open, maybe that's not the strategy. But if I need someone to just fill in over lunches and during the day, I really want a part-time mom. I really want a stay-at-home mom who, the kids are at school and they can be there during the day. And then I know they have to leave. So when we're looking also for part-time, we really look at our membership too. We look to see who we know that might be a good fit before actually advertising it out there. And most times we find someone who's going to be a good fit that we just know before we even have to reach out and find somebody.
We find that staff referrals work well because your team members already know your work environment and what's expected and the perks. And if they refer somebody, we are pretty confident they're going to be a good fit. We're not in the habit of approaching people like at a restaurant saying, hey, you're good, would you like to work for us? But if they mention they're looking for a job and they're doing extremely well personality-wise in another job, we'll give them a business card and say, give us a call.
Any other questions?
Okay. I'm going to go a little bit out of chronological order. I know our lunch is probably here, but I want to go ahead and just do our closing remarks and make a couple of announcements, and then we'll go to lunch, and everybody can stay as long as you can for networking. But if you need to get going, it's okay too. So that'll kind of keep us on track with getting everybody back on the road if you need to get out the door. I don't want to lose the audience, but thank you so much to Bill and Ashley. Lots of good information there. I love the rest of the job you want, not the one you have. I love that you have fun at work and you talk about listening to people and just really, really great advice in there. So thank you so much for sharing all of that and all your work at me. Any questions and keeping everything on track for us. All right. So for the close today, we have a little bit of an announcement that we want to make. And we talked a little bit earlier about this is our 4th year, and we feel like we've reached a bit of a milestone here. Patsy shared how the global leadership is working and how that network has really come together. I'm thinking about how it's really like, the emergence of a butterfly, where it starts out as a caterpillar and then it goes into the cocoon, and then there's that catalyst period where it's sprouting some wings, and at the end of the line, it really comes out as this butterfly that's, able to withstand the wind and the rain and still make its journey. So I feel like Global Women's Leadership Network and the PA Sister Society are really kind of in the same evolution, if you will, of becoming and emerging that butterfly, that monarch butterfly that's probably migrating south right now. But it really is very interesting to see how some of the things that we're doing are paralleling what's already going on at Global Women's Leadership Network, and how we've been able to really hit the ground running and get some results quickly. We talked about how our committee structure has really been very powerful for us. And when Lori and I started out, it was 2015, and we knew Pennsylvania has a lot of credit unions. Pennsylvania has a lot of women in leadership roles in their credit unions, but we don't have a women's leadership group in Pennsylvania that was really active or gaining any momentum or steam. So we wanted to say, hey, what do you think about doing the Global Women's Leadership Network and their sister society concept? And it really resonated with a lot of people. We did kind of the parking lot test and talked to people before we actually went ahead and did this thing. But really, when we came out in September, and this was actually the same month that we started in 2015, we had no idea if it was going to be, Lori and I sitting there with a plate of sandwiches, or if we were going to actually have people come out and engage with us. And we were blown away at the response that we got. We had probably 65 to 75 women who came out, and they were excited to be there, and things really just took off from there. We then went to our committee structure. We then went to, finding chairs and looking at development opportunities and making committee charters so that everybody knew what their role was on the committees. And so that really, really took shape and form pretty quickly. So what's left and what's next? We're really thinking about now, where are we going to take this thing that we're going to be able to continue to provide meaningful content and value to you guys when you come. You're taking time away from your credit union, you're traveling a distance to be here. We want to make sure that the time that you're spending here is worthwhile to you. So things like today, where you're hearing from the Global Women's Leadership Network at a national level, and you're hearing from other CEOs that are giving you a different perspective, are all very, very meaningful. And I think I heard Bill talking about, and Joe, like that value of going to the bar at the annual meeting, or the networking that you're doing, or connecting with people for coffee or for lunch. Those things are very, very important, because not only do you form friendships for life, but you're able to learn from each other and share information and get traction that you would otherwise not have. You might be spinning your wheels by yourself in your office, at your branch, in your position, and you really have a huge opportunity here today to connect with people that can help you grow in your career and really just reach your goals that you have for yourself personally. But some of the things that we're looking at, we are going to do our strategic planning this year after the Global Women's Leadership Network group does theirs in early November. So probably in November, December, even January timeframe, we're going to come back around the table with our committees. And anybody who's interested in joining us, please let us know, because we'll be happy to include you. But we're looking at a couple of things specifically. We want to look at, is there value to having a more formal mentoring program? So rather than just relying on networking to happen in the meetings when we're here, do we want to try to do somewhat of a more formal mentoring program? And we get mixed reviews on that. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there are enough of those already out there in existence that maybe we don't need to recreate another one. But we're going to look at that, and we're going to talk about it and find better ways to get more networking and more collaboration going among our group here. And then we're also looking at things, more formal sponsorship programs. So we did do a little bit of work on that this year, but we have some ideas and ways to attract more sponsorship so we could be doing more meaningful things and providing more education and training at our sessions than what we already have been able to. And then we're looking for ways to reach our emerging leaders. So we say emerging leaders as opposed to young professionals, because it's not always going to be the youngest in the room. It may be some of the people that are re-entering their careers after having a period off at home with children, or taking a sidebar to do some education or something of that nature. So we're calling it emerging leaders, and we want to be able to connect with people that are really starting to emerge as a leader and know they want to go after that. They're not really sure how to do that or what the next step should be. So those are some of the initiatives that we have in mind as we go into this strategic planning for next year that we're going to really brainstorm around. So if you feel passionately about either of those topics or anything that we're doing here and you'd like to be involved, please let us know that, because we'd love to have, you know, a fresh perspective and new people coming in. And kind of along those lines, we decided that it's the fourth year, and Lori and I are looking at each other and we're saying, well, this isn't the Amy and Lori show. You might want to take a step back and say, okay, who else is there out there that might be interested in moving into this chair role and taking over some of the leadership of the you know, society and taking it to the next level and bringing in a fresh perspective. So we kind of put the word out there at the last meeting, and we had a couple of people come forward. So Lori and I sat down and we had some conversations. We had conversations about what are we looking for, what do we need, where do we think we should be heading. And after we had that conversation and kind of jotted down like what the key points were of what we were really looking for, then we started with the conversations with the individuals. So out of that, we have arrived at a selection of an individual who will come in and transition into the chair role as I begin to transition away from being in a lead role. I'm not going to go away. I'm still going to be in a leadership role. I'm still going to have a say at, you know, what we're doing. But I want to give somebody else the opportunity to be up here to really have a say in what's going on and bring their perspective and their kind of fingerprints to what we're doing. So, without further ado, I will introduce to you our next co-chair. We have selected Linda Brown to join us as our next co-chair. Linda's an individual that she is known as an outstanding leader in the credit union movement. Many of you around the room already know Linda as either a peer because you work with her at Service First, or you know her from interacting with her at networking events. She is known across the state, Pennsylvania-wide, and I would venture to say even nationally, Linda is a known entity. She has been doing work with World Council, so she's gone on some of the trips that, you know, Patsy mentioned earlier, where you get immersed in what is a startup credit union in a third world country. So she really brings some very, very valuable experience, and I think is really going to be key to bridging our gap between what is the PA Sister Society and how are we connecting with our World Council and the Global Women's Leadership Network Initiative. So we are just really excited to have Linda come in and move into this role as I transition away and bring her new fresh perspective and new outlook on things for us. So Linda, I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words if you want, but if you don't, that's okay too. What's your last one?
Well, I am very excited. When I was talking to Amy and Lori, I don't know what shoe size Amy is, but I know that they are big shoes to fill. But I just know how much I enjoy coming to these meetings and the connections that we're making. And I think it's all about, you know, growth and development. And sometimes I think it's being the best person that you can be. I think it's important to be a continuous learner. And I think that that's something that we're focused on the education committee. I think from a membership perspective, we'd like to fill a bigger room with more women coming out and men to understand some of the challenges and opportunities that we're looking to tackle. I think we have a great plan of work that we're looking at for the upcoming year, and just encourage you all to keep coming, bring a friend, and keep giving us good feedback, because the items that Amy mentioned really came out of the feedback that we're getting from our review. So excited about the opportunity, appreciate the support that we already get from all of you, and just know that that's going to continue to grow.
Thank you, and congratulations, Linda.